Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the best Reddit answers being read to you. Enjoy! Funeral organizers of Reddit, what are the weirdest or most unique funerals you have organized? As a funeral music planner and organist, I've worked with families on many funerals to honor special requests. One was a Wizard of Oz themed funeral, where the deceased woman had loved the original movie and requested that music from it be used. Pallbearers and friends of the family dressed in costumes of the principal characters as they entered the church, including dozens of munchkins, Toto and the Witch. There wasn't a dry eye after the eulogy when the soloist sang Over the Rainbow, but many smiles as the coffin was carried out of the church en route to the cemetery as everyone sang We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. I've been in the funeral industry for over 10 years now, and most services I have arranged have been run-of-the-mill. Most people seem to want similar things, but one service will always stand out to me. A family asked us to play some hardcore gangster rap for their mother/grandmother at her service, and we happily obliged. I can't quite remember the name of the song, but it had heavy themes of murder, drug use and pretty foul language. Her service was then finished with a recital of the Lord's Prayer. This lady was in her late 80s. Ha, I love this. That lady must have been epic. When my grandfather died, we had a request we were afraid was odd, but the funeral director told us he'd seen much stranger, so it was okay. My grandfather was big into motorcycles. He had Harleys as long as I can remember, and even after he had his hip surgery and the doctor told him not to ride anymore, he retooled his bike into a trike so he could still ride. So after he died, my uncle outfitted the trike with a special rig, very secure and very safe, so that we could take him to the cemetery in his coffin on the back of the motorcycle. My uncle drove the motorcycle while all the members of my grandfather's riding club circled him from the funeral parlor to the cemetery. It was badass and awesome, and I know my grandfather would have loved it. I am not a funeral organizer but a control engineer. During a project I worked with a guy who did the crematorium oven systems, and he had some good stories. Story 1, a young guy died in a diving accident. His friends and family wanted him to be cremated in his diving suit. The crematorium guys told them they could not do this, but did not tell the reason. So the family decided to sneakily put his diving suit underneath his normal clothing, to give their loved one a proper farewell. So, the core goes into the oven, the neoprene suit catches fire, and if you have ever seen a car tire fire, you know what comes next. Picture the scene, a lovely bit of countryside with lush green fields, birds tweeting, elegant crematorium in the center, with huge black billowing clouds of smoke coming out of the chimney, to be seen and smelled all over the area. Whoops. The next obvious one is the sneaking of bottles of expensive whiskey in the pockets of the deceased, popular with the Indian population. I won't have to tell you that the combination of an 800°C oven and a bottle of 40% volume booze is an exciting one. Best one was the story of the eco-friendly coffin. This crematorium had a system where the coffin during the ceremony would be lifted with two metal forks, the oven door opened, coffin gets inserted in the oven, door closes halfway, forks retract and the coffin, pressing against the door, stays in the oven, and finally the door closes completely. Well, this system is perfect for wooden coffins, but this guy was into his environment etc. and had an eco-friendly coffin made of some type of recycled cardboard. The forks lift, the oven door opens, the forks slide in, the coffin disintegrates instantaneously when it meets the intense heat of the oven, the door lowers half, the forks retreat, taking the body back outside of the oven. Family and friends are distraught, staff try with broomsticks to push the corpse back in the oven, total chaos ensues. I once went to a funeral of a young person who died from a terminal illness and had planned her own funeral. She had a white coffin, and at the graveside everyone took turns to sigh the coffin/write messages in colored marker pens. It was pretty touching. I knew a family with 6 kids, one of the eldest with CP. She passed away in her early teens. The family got a white casket, and all the siblings, plus young cousins and friends, drew pictures. It was lovely and a nice send-off. Not a funeral organizer, but one of my sisters was killed by a drunk driver, so as a family we were trying to figure out what to do for her funeral/memorial. She was cremated, so we had a lovely memorial at my dad's place outside, and planted a couple of trees for her. My sister had a big personality in life and she loved to have fun and make people laugh. My other sisters and I decided that rather than wear black, we would wear the most outrageous ball gowns we could get our hands on. Mine ended up being black with peacock feathers embroidered all over. One of my other sisters wore an enormous orange tutu. She would have absolutely loved it. It helped make the day a little less bitter and a little more sweet. A Viking funeral. Putting the ashes of the deceased out to sea in a little boat fashioned out of salt and covered with dry flowers/kindling. Fashioning biodegradable arrows with flaming tips. Everyone shot flaming arrows at the boat and it caught fire, then dissolved into the sea. Now, to be clear, Vikings never did any of this, but Hollywood gave people ideas. Apparently I am not the first, but it was cool. Put the fun back in funeral. I have an Indianist friend, they're pretending to be Native American. One of them died and they wanted a native funeral, but we're in Eastern Europe and have strong funeral culture, so it was super hard to do anything. All they achieved was forcing the funeral house worker to paint the dead guy's face black with mascara. Late to the party, but I'll add my own. I'm not a funeral director, but a few years ago when my grandmother died, miss you Granny, my 2 sisters and 2 cousins were preparing her body for the viewing, as they were all cosmetologists. I should say that my family has a bit of a strange sense of humor. And for anyone that says this might be disrespectful, my granny would have laughed her donkey off at this. So anyway, they are putting on all her makeup and they are playfully arguing over how it should be done. Eventually, this escalated in them comparing their own makeup to what they were doing for Granny. They were joking about who did the better job, and to get an accurate depiction, they were lying down next to the coffin, closing their eyes and folding their arms on their chest, and the others would compare. They would then adjust both their own makeup and Granny's to get it right. It was at this point that the funeral director walked in. He opened the door, saw my cousin lying on the floor as though she was dead, with the others giddily adjusting Granny's makeup and using my dead cousin as a reference. There was an awkward pause for a few seconds before the girls all burst into laughter. The funeral director was visibly uncomfortable and silently left. After all was said and done, they went to apologize to the director, admitting that they were just having a bit of fun. He said it was alright, just a bit strange. He admitted that he did chuckle a bit as he was walking away. Fast forward to the service, a family friend was giving a eulogy and the girls are looking at Granny up front in the coffin. They are trying to hold back smirks to each other, and a few people are noticing. They look to the back of the room, where the funeral director is standing. He flashes them a smirk himself, then closes his eyes and pulls his hands to chest to imitate a dead person in a coffin. Apparently, it took everything they had to not burst out laughing on the spot. Not a funeral director. But I've attended a funeral where there was a pop quiz on my friend's life, and if you got it right you'd get a lollies. There was also a playlist that had everyone up dancing. R.I.P. Barb. This sounds amazing. It was definitely one to remember. Oh, I forgot hats. All of my mates' hats were there, so we dressed up and got to take them home too. Best non-tragic one for me. Pallbearers so drunk they could barely stand, let alone carry the casket. They agreed to wheel out on a trolley. Some still holding their goon sacks, bladders used in box wine for you non-Aussies, in their free hand. Something about your mentioning not being able to carry the casket reminded me of my grandmother's funeral. She had been in denial about her imminent death right up to the very end, and had refused to plan her funeral or talk about it at all, with anyone. Since we had a lot of family across the country and out of the country, when she died my grandpa decided to bury her quickly and informally, and have a long beautiful memorial service for her once everyone could get here. So at the informal burial, we had no service or anything, just met at the graveyard and watched her casket be buried. There was a little confusion about getting the casket from the hearse to the grave digging truck. Only my dad, brother and husband were strong enough to do it, meaning we were going to have to impose on the hearse driver and the grave digger to help us. Looking around, wondering in the moment who else could help, my dad beckoned my grandpa over to carry a side of the casket. My 89-year-old grandpa. I looked at my dad like he was crazy, but my grandpa stepped forward like he was maybe going to try. In that moment I realized my dad saw my grandpa very differently than I did. I saw him as a frail old man, which he is. My dad saw him as, well, Dad. Strong, capable, that larger-than-life persona of what a man should be. My dad just had no idea how frail his father had become, because in his mind, he was and always will be Dad, and everything that comes with that word. What would have been your answer or question? Leave it in the comments below. Slap that like and subscribe button for more, and check out the link in the video description for even more answers. Peace out, and catch you in the next video.